The 12 Chairs by Ilf Petrov. Chapter 30 in the Columbus Theater. Ippolit Matveyevich was slowly becoming a bootlicker. Whenever he looked at Ostap, his eyes acquired a blue lackeyish tinge. It was so hot in Ivanopulo's room that Vorobianinov's chairs creaked like logs in the fireplace. The smooth operator was having a nap with the light blue waistcoat under his head. Ippolit Matveyevich looked out of the window. A carriage emblazoned with a coat of arms was moving along the curved side of the street past the tiny Moscow gardens. The black gloss reflected the passers-by one after another, a horse guard in a brass helmet, society ladies, and fluffy white clouds. Drumming the roadway with their hooves, the horses drew the carriage past Ippolit Matveyevich. He winced with disappointment. The carriage bore the initials of the Moscow Communal Services and was being used to carry away refuse. Its slatted sides reflected nothing at all. In the coachman's seat sat a fine-looking old man with a fluffy white beard. If Ippolit Matveyevich had known that this was none other than Count Alexei Bulanov, the famous hermit hussar, he would probably have hailed the old man and chatted with him about the good old days. Count Bulanov was deeply troubled. As he whipped up the horses, he mused about the red tape that was strangling the sub-department of sanitation, and on account of which he had not received for 6 months the apron he was entitled to under his contract.
"Listen," said the smooth operator suddenly. "What did they call you as a boy?"
"What do you want to know for?"
"I just want to know what to call you. I'm sick of calling you Vorobianinov, and Ippolit Matveyevich is too stuffy. What were you called, Ippy?"
"Pussy," replied Ippolit Matveyevich with a snicker.
"That's more like it. So look, Pussy, see what's wrong with my back. It hurts between the shoulder blades."
Ostap pulled the cowboy shirt over his head. Before Pussy Vorobianinov was revealed the broad back of a provincial Antinos, a back of enchanting shape but rather dirty. "Aha, I see some redness." Between the smooth operator's shoulders were some strangely shaped mauve bruises which reflected colors like a rainbow in oil. "Honestly, it's the number 8, exclaimed Vorobianinov. "First time I've ever seen a bruise like that."
"Any other number?"
asked Ostap. "There seems to be a letter P."
"I have no more questions. It's quite clear. That damn pen. You see how I suffer, Pussy, and what risks I run for your chairs. These arithmetical figures were branded on me by the huge self-falling pen with a number 86 nib. I should point out to you that the damn pen fell on my back at the very moment I inserted my hands inside the chief editor's chair. But you can't do anything right. Who was it messed up Izhnarenkov's chair so that I had to go and do your work for you? I won't even mention the auction, a fine time to go woman chasing. It's simply bad for you at your age to do that. Look after your health. Take me on the other hand. I got the widow's chair, I got the 2 Shukin chairs. It was me who finally got Izhnarenkov's chair. It was me who went to the newspaper office and to Lapus's. There was only one chair that you managed to run down, and that was with the help of your holy enemy, the Archbishop." Silently walking up and down in his bare feet, the technical advisor reasoned with the submissive Pussy. The chair, which had vanished into the goods yard of October Station, was still a blot on the glossy schedule of the concession. The 4 chairs in the Columbus Theater were a sure bet, but the theater was about to make a trip down the Volga aboard the lottery ship SS Scriabin, and was presenting the premiere of The Marriage that day as the last production of the season. The partners had to decide whether to stay in Moscow and look for the chair lost in the wilds of Kalenchev Square or go on tour with the troupe. Ostap was in favor of the latter. "Or perhaps we should split up," he suggested. "I'll go off with the theater, and you stay and find out about the chair in the goods yard."
Pussy's gray eyelashes flickered so fearfully, however, that Ostap did not bother to continue.
"Of the 2 birds," said Ostap, "the meteor should be chosen. Let's go together. But the expenses will be considerable. We shall need money. I have 60 rubles left. How much have you? Oh, I forgot. At your age, a maiden's love is so expensive. I decree that we go together to the premiere of The Marriage. Don't forget to wear tails. If the chairs are still there and haven't been sold to pay Social Security debts, we can leave tomorrow. Remember, Vorobianinov, we've now reached the final act of the comedy My Mother-in-Law's Treasure. The finita la commedia is fast approaching, Vorobianinov. Don't gasp, my old friend. The call of the footlights. Oh, my younger days. Oh, the smell of the wings. So many memories. So many intrigues and affairs. How talented I was in my time in the role of Hamlet. In short, the hearing is continued."
For the sake of economy, they went to the theater on foot. It was still quite light, but the street lamps were already casting their lemon light. Spring was dying before everyone's eyes. Dust chased it from the squares, and a warm breeze drove it from the side streets. Old women fondled the beauty and drank tea with it at little round tables in the yards, but spring's span of life had ended and it could not reach the people. And it so much wanted to be at the Pushkin Monument, where the young men were already strolling about in their jazzy caps, drain-pipe trousers, dog's delight bow ties, and boots. Mauve-powdered girls circulated between the Holy of Holies of the Moscow Consumers Union and the Commune Cooperative. The girls were swearing audibly. This was the hour when pedestrians slowed down their pace, though not because Tverskaya Street was becoming crowded. Moscow horses were no better than the Stargorod ones. They stamped their hooves just as much on the edges of the roadway. Cyclists rode noiselessly by from their first large international match at the Young Pioneer Stadium. The ice cream man trundled along his green trolley full of May Thunder ice cream and squinted timorously at the militia man, but the latter was chained to the spot by the flashing signal with which he regulated the traffic and was not dangerous. The two friends made their way through the hustle and bustle. Temptation lay in wait for them at every step. Different types of meat on skewers were being roasted in full view of the street in the tiny eating place. Hot appetizing fumes rose up to the bright sky. The sound of string music was wafted from beer halls, small restaurants, and the great silent film cinema. A loudspeaker raved away at a tram stop. It was time to put a spurt on. The friends reached the foyer of the Columbus Theater. Vorobyaninov rushed to the box office and read the list of seat prices. "Rather expensive, I'm afraid," he said. 3 rubles for the 16th row.
"How I dislike these provincial Philistines," Ostap observed. "Where are you going? Can't you see that's the box office?"
"Where else? We won't get in without tickets."
"Pussy Volga. In every well-built theater there are 2 windows. Only courting couples and wealthy heirs go to the box office window. The other citizens, they make up the majority, you may observe, go straight to the manager's window."
And indeed, at the box office window were only about 5 modestly dressed people. They may have been wealthy heirs or courting couples. At the manager's window, however, there was great activity. A colorful line had formed. Young men in fashion jackets and trousers of the same cut, which a provincial could never have dreamed of owning, were confidently waving notes from friendly directors, actors, editors, theater costumers, the district militia chief, and other persons closely connected with the theater, such as members of the Theater and Film Critics Association, the Poor Mother's Tear Society, the School Council of the Experimental Circus Workshop, and some extraordinary name like Fortinbras at Umslapogas. About 8 people had notes from Asperi Aklerovich. Ostap barged into the line, jostled aside the Fortinbrasites, and with a cry of, "I only want some information, can't you see I haven't taken my galoshes off?" pushed his way to the window and peered inside. The manager was working like a slave. Bright diamonds of perspiration irrigated his fat face. The telephone interrupted him all the time and rang with the obstinacy of a tram trying to pass through the Smolensk market. "Hurry up and give me the note," he shouted at Ostap.
2 seats, said Ostap quietly, in the stalls.
"Who for?"
"Me."
"And who might you be?"
"Now surely you know me."
"No, I don't." But the stranger's gaze was so innocent and open that the manager's hand by itself gave Ostap 2 seats in the 11th row. "All kinds come here," said the manager, shrugging his shoulders. "Who knows who they are? They may be from the Ministry of Education. I seem to have seen him at the ministry. Where else could it have been?" And mechanically issuing passes to the lucky film and theater critics, the manager went on quietly trying to remember where he had seen those clear eyes before. When all the passes had been issued and the lights went down in the foyer, he remembered he had seen them in the Taganka prison in 1922, while he was doing time for some trivial matter. Laughter echoed from the 11th row where the concessionaires were sitting. Ostap liked the musical introduction, performed by the orchestra on bottles, esmarch doches, saxophones, and large bass drums. A flute whistled and the curtain went up, wafting a breath of cool air. To the surprise of Vorobyaninov, who was used to a classical interpretation of the marriage, Podkolosyn was not on the stage. Searching around with his eyes, he perceived some plyboard triangles hanging from the ceiling and painted the primary colors of the spectrum. There were no doors or blue muslin windows. Beneath the multicolored triangles danced young ladies in large hats from black cardboard. The clinking of bottles brought forth Podkolosyn, who charged into the crowd riding on Stepan's back. Podkolosyn was arrayed in courier's dress. Having dispersed the young ladies with words which were not in the play, he bawled out, "Stepan!" At the same time, he leaped to one side and froze in a difficult pose. The esmarch doches began to clatter. "Stepan!" repeated Podkolosyn, taking another leap. But since Stepan, who was standing right there in a leopard skin, did not respond, Podkolosyn asked tragically, "Why are you silent like the League of Nations?" I'm obviously afraid of Chamberlain, replied Stepan, scratching his skin. There was a general feeling that Stepan would oust Podkolosyn and become the chief character in this modernized version of the play. Well, is the tailor making a coat? A leap, a blow on the Esmarch-doshes. Stepan stood on his hands with an effort, and still in that position answered, yes, he is. The orchestra played a potpourri from Madame Butterfly. Stepan stood on his hands the whole time, his face flooded with color. And didn't the tailor ask what the master wanted such good cloth for? Stepan, who was by this time pitting in the orchestra, cuddling the conductor, answered, no, he didn't. He's not a member of the British Parliament, is he? And didn't the tailor ask whether the master wished to get married? The tailor asked whether the master wanted to pay alimony. At this point, the lights went out and the audience began stamping their feet. They kept up the stamping until Podkolosyn's voice could be heard saying from the stage, citizens, don't be alarmed. The lights went out on purpose as part of the act. It's required for the scenic effects. The audience gave in. The lights did not go up again until the end of the act. The drums rolled in complete darkness. A squad of soldiers dressed as hotel doormen passed by carrying torches. Then Kochkarev arrived, apparently on a camel. This could only be judged from the following dialogue. Ouch, how you have frightened me, and you came on a camel, too. Ah, so you noticed despite the darkness. I wanted to bring you a fragrant Carmelia. During the intermission, the concessionaires read the program. Do you like it? Ippolit Matveyevich asked timidly. Do you? It's very interesting, only Stepan is rather odd.
No, I don't like it, said Ostap. Particularly the fact that the furniture is from some Vagopus workshops or other. I hope those aren't our chairs adapted to the new style.
Their fears were unjustified. At the beginning of the second act, all 4 chairs were brought to the stage by people in top hats. The matchmaking scene aroused the greatest interest among the audience. At the moment Agafya Tikhonovna was coming down a rope stretched across the entire width of the theater, the terrifying orchestra let out such a noise that she nearly fell off into the audience, but on the stage she balanced perfectly. She was wearing flesh-colored tights and a bowler. Maintaining her balance by means of a green parasol in which was written, I want Podkolosyn, she stepped along the wire and everyone below immediately saw that her feet were dirty. She leaped from the wire straight onto a chair, whereupon Podkolosyn, Kochkarev in a tutu, and the matchmaker in a bus driver's uniform all turned backward somersaults. Then they had a 5-minute rest, to hide which the lights were turned out again. The suitors were also very comic, particularly Omelette. In his plays, a huge pan of fried eggs was brought onto the stage. The sailor wore a mast with a sail. In vain did Starikov the merchant cry out that he was being crippled by taxes. Agafya Tikhonovna did not like him. She married Stepan. They both dived into the fried eggs served by Podkolosyn, who had turned into a footman. Kochkarev and Fekla sang ditties about Chamberlain and the repayment he hoped to extort from Germany. The Esmarch-doshes played a hymn for the dying, and the curtain came down, wafting a breath of cool air.
I'm satisfied with the performance, said Ostap. The chairs are intact, but we've no time to lose. If Agafya Tikhonovna is going to land on those chairs each day, they won't last very long.
Jostling and laughing, the young men in their fashion jackets discussed the finer points of the scenic effects.
You need some shut-eye, pussy, said Ostap. We have to stand in line for tickets early tomorrow morning. The theater is leaving by express for Nizhny tomorrow morning at 7, so get 2 seats in a hard coach to Nizhny on the Kursk Railway. We'll sit it out. It's only one night.
The next day, the Columbus Theater was sitting on the buffet at Kursk Station. Having taken steps to see that the scenic effects went by the same train, Simbovich Sindovich was having a snack at one of the tables. Dipping his mustache into the beer, he asked the fitter nervously, "The hydraulic press won't get broken on the way, will it?" "It's not the press that's the trouble," said fitter Mechnikov. "It's that it only works for 5 minutes and we have to cut it around the whole summer." "Was it any easier with the time projector from the ideology powder?" "Of course it was. The projector was big but not so fragile." At the next table sat Agafya Tikhonovna, a youngish woman with hard shiny legs like Skittles. The sound effects, Gulkin, Polkin, Mulkin, Chulkin, and Zolkind, fussed around her. "You didn't keep in time with me yesterday," she complained. "I might have fallen off." "What can we do?" clamored the sound effects. "2 doshes broke." "You think it's easy to get an Esmarch-dosh from abroad nowadays," cried Gulkin. "Just try going to the state medical supply office." "It's impossible to buy a thermometer, let alone an Esmarch-dosh," added Polkin. "Do you play thermometers as well?" asked the girl, horrified. "It's not that we play thermometers," observed Zolkind, "but that the damned doshes are enough to drive you out of your mind and we had to take our own temperatures." Nitch Sestrin, stage manager and producer, was strolling along the platform with his wife. Podkolison and Kochkarov had downed 3 vodkas and were wooing Georgetta Tiraposkik, each trying to outdo the other. The concessionaires had arrived 2 hours before the train was due to depart and were now on their 6th round of the garden laid out in front of the station. Ippolit Matveyevich's head was whirling. The hunt for the chairs was entering the last lap. Long shadows fell on the scorching roadway. Dust settled on their wet, sweaty faces. Cabs rattled past them and there was a smell of petrol. Hired vehicles set down their passengers. Porters ran up to them and carried off the bags while their badges glittered in the sun. The muse of travel had people by the throat.
"Let's get going as well," said
Ostap. Ippolit Matveyevich meekly consented. All of a sudden he came face to face with Bezenchuk the Undertaker. "Bezenchuk," he exclaimed in amazement. "How did you get here?" Bezenchuk doffed his cap and was speechless with joy. "Mr. Vorobyaninov," he cried. "Greetings to an honored guest." "Well, how are things?" "Bad," answered the Undertaker. "Why is that?" "I'm looking for clients. There ain't none about." "Is the nymph doing better than you?" "Likely. Could they do better than me? No chance. Since your mother-in-law, only Tier and Constantine has croaked." "You don't say. Did he really die?" "He croaked, Ippolit Matveyevich. He croaked at his post. He was shaving Leopold the chemist when he croaked. People said it was his insides that burst, but I think it was the smell of medicine from the chemist that he couldn't take." Dear me, muttered Ippolit Matveyevich. "So you buried him, did you?" "I buried him. Who else could? Does the nymph damn him give tassels? You got in ahead of them, then." "Yes, I did, but they beat me up afterwards, almost beat the guts out of me. The militia took me away. I was in bed for 2 days. I cured myself with spirits." "You massaged yourself?" "No, I don't do that with spirits. But what made you come here?" "I've bought my stock." "What stock?" "My own. A guard I know helped me bring it here free in the guard's van. Did it as a friend." It was only then that Ippolit Matveyevich noticed a neat pile of coffins on the ground a little way from Bezenchuk. Some had tassels, others did not. One of them Ippolit Matveyevich recognized immediately. It was the dark, dusty oak coffin from Bezenchuk's shop window. 8 of them, said Bezenchuk smugly, like gherkins. But who needs your coffins here? They have plenty of their own undertakers. What about the flu? What flu? The epidemic. Proust told me the flu was raging in Moscow and there was nothing to bury people in. All the coffins were used up, so I decided to put things right. Ostap, who had been listening to the conversation with curiosity, intervened.
"Listen, Dad, the flu epidemic is in Paris."
"In Paris?"
"Yes, go to Paris, you'll make money. Admittedly, there may be some trouble with the visa, but don't give up. If Brienne likes you, you'll do pretty well. They'll set you up as Undertaker Royal to the Paris municipality. Here they have enough of their own undertakers."
Bezenchuk looked around him wildly. Despite the assurances of Prusis, there were certainly no bodies lying about. People were cheerfully moving about on their feet, and some were even laughing. Long after the train had carried off the concessionaires, the Columbus Theater, and various other people, Bezenchuk was still standing in a daze by his coffins. His eyes shone in the approaching darkness with an unfading light.